Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what I'm going to do is just show you all the sort of typical React errors. Okay, so that way you can kind of get an idea of like, hey, if I see this, maybe it's this. So let's do that. Let me first create a new React app. This is assuming that you do know something about React, so I'm not going to be explaining what React is or the basics of React. Some of the things are to be assumed. I do have React 101 videos if you want to go get those basics. But anyways, let's create a new React app. So I'll do npx create React app. Test all the things. Okay, that's going to take a second. But bottom line is this. A lot of the times, most of the errors you'll run into in React really just come down to JavaScript stuff. It's not specifically React errors. Some of them are. They're more like little quirks of React, but most of the time it's going to be some sort of JavaScript thing that needs to be fixed. So let's see here. Let's go into the folder, test all the things. Let's start the React project, npm start. Let's move this to the side, move this over here so we can see the errors side by side. Now here's the thing. Let's start off with basic JSX errors. Okay, so I'm going to erase all the JSX. Again, JSX is just this HTML that these components return. So if I were to just delete all this, actually I want to do it from parenthesis to parenthesis. There we go. Okay. And right now, I'm actually shockingly not getting an error. Okay. But let's say I did this. First, let's actually just return the number 1. Okay. That didn't do what I thought it was going to do. But let's do this. I return h1, hello world. Okay. That shows up. I have an h1 hello world. That's wonderful. A React component at the end of the day, it's just a thing that returns this JSX, this HTML. Okay. Now watch if I do this. If I say, okay, on the next line, h2 or h1, yada, yada, yada. Okay, this is probably sort of like a React 101 problem. Okay, so notice it says adjacent JSX elements. See, there's 2 elements next to each other. At the end of the day, React, any JSX expression can only have 1 element at the top level. That means all the elements in your JSX have to be within something. Okay, if you don't have an idea what you want it to be within, the simplest solution is to use a fragment. So you just put like an empty tag and you wrap everything inside that empty tag like this. And see, this works. That works. You could also just have been just as easily have been a div. Okay, but notice that there's nothing next to the div. Everything is inside the div. There can only be one thing that everything is inside of. So everything is inside this div. Okay, only one top level element in any JSX expression. Okay, and you realize that like if I were to create another variable that's JSX, so if I were to sit here and say, hey, const more JSX, this is a separate JSX expression, so it gets its own top level element. So I might want to do something like, hey, h3 cheese, h3 blah. Okay, and then I go boop, boop. And then this works. Okay, but again, if I were to take out that fragment, I'd get the same error for creating this variable. Because a JSX expression has to always have one top level thing. And again, the cool thing about JSX is you can inject variables. And those variables could contain JSX. So as you can see here, this variable has JSX. So I'm able to just inject that into my thing here. So more JSX. Okay, cool. And that injects itself. I could inject a variable that holds a number. So const num equals 1. So I can inject the variable that has a number. Okay, and see, there's the number 1. I could inject a variable that has a string. Hello. Okay, and then I'll just inject that. Again, it's just these curly brackets. I can inject whatever variables I have. Stir. Okay, Cool. And see, it says like one hello. Let's put a BR, just that would, just a line break. Okay. Cool. And I could also not have to inject a variable at all. I could just put just a JavaScript expression inside these curly brackets. I could do something like 5 times 5 divided by 4. Okay, and say I get 2.5 there. Let me just put another BR here. BR slash. Okay, and so 5 times 5 is 25 divided by 4. Yeah, that makes sense, 6.25. But see, so you can put any valid JavaScript within these curly brackets. That's the point of the curly brackets. They're just saying, hey, in here, we're in JavaScript world. The thing is that what it's doing, it's taking whatever is in here and turning it into JSX. JavaScript does not know how to turn, React does not know how to turn an object into JSX. It just would be like, how would you do this? So if I were to create this object, const Alex equals, and I have this object that has like my name, Alex Merced, age 35, just for a little bit longer. Okay. Oops, I defined all these variables in a weird place. I just realized I defined them all outside of the component. Now it's saying app is not defined. Why does it say that? Because app is defined. Did I leave something open? I think I might have. Let's see here, curly brackets. I'll just refresh, I think. Maybe. Yep, yeah, it's just a refreshing thing. And that's another thing. Sometimes it'll tell you there's an error, because if you have autosave on, which I do, it's constantly updating midway while you're typing. So sometimes you're not done typing something and there's an error, but it just stops updating itself. So it gets stuck on the error. So you just need to hit refresh. So that's another thing to kind of keep an eye out for. But now watch what happens if I try to like put this object inside of like its own div. So I say, here, I want to put Alex here. I get this error. Okay. I think I might get a different error if I refresh the page. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Objects are not valid as React children. Okay. What it's saying is that, hey, I'm trying to inject Alex here. Alex is not it's not a number. It's not a string. It's an object. It's this whole object here. And React has no idea how to make that appear. What I really want to do is use the individual properties of the object. So I want to do like alex.name. That's what I want to do here. And see, there's alex.name. I want to use the individual properties of the object. Okay, so you can't inject an object. And a lot of people get tempted because like sometimes an object has so many properties. They're like, yeah, I'm just going to plop this right here and I'm not going to do each one of these individually. Nope, nope, nope. No shortcuts. Okay. Now, there are ways to simplify that, but I guess into some more advanced JavaScript, like you want to like show every property inside an object and not have to like hand do it. There are ways, but I'll just give you a hint. Learn about what's something called object.keys and for-in loops and things like that. Okay, so that's cool. That's a thing. Now the next thing I want to do is Jsx error. Let's do this. Let's say we wanted to create a component. Actually, let's just first this. Let's just install React Router npm. Actually, not install React Router. So let me start that server again. I'm going to try to use React Router. Okay, so if I were to do an import browser router as a router, it's just normal like React Router boilerplate from React Router DOM. Now look at this error I'm going to get. Module not found. Can't resolve React Router DOM. What this means is that it can't find it. It can't find this library called React Router DOM. If it can't find it, then you need to check, is it installed? How do you know? Package.json. In your package.json, there's a section called dependencies. Anything that's installed will show up here. I do not see React Router DOM. So then I need to do an npm install react router DOM, and that'll fix my worries. Okay, so all these, the module not found errors are literally what they mean. They can't find it. Which, if it's a live array, that means you didn't install it. If it's something in another file, you probably either didn't type the file name right, or you didn't export the thing in that file. Okay, because things you imported have to be exported. So notice here at the bottom of this file, export default app. It's got to be exported. So those are common things. Okay, so I think, what other common errors do we see in React world? Okay, so that's loading. Another one's like this. So if we were to use state, so let me go import the use state hook. Import use state and use effect from React. Okay, let's create some states. So we'll say const state. Again, this is not a lesson about how to use state, so I have videos going over that. Use state 1, so we're going to initiate the variable at 1, and it doesn't like that for some reason. Oh, that's right. I have to be in, hooks always have to be used inside. So there's actually another good error. React hook use state cannot be called inside the top at the top level. What does that mean? It means all hooks, use state, use effect, they have to be inside the component. So see, the app component is the function. The component is the function that returns JSX. I have to be inside here to use the hook. Problem is, I'm not in anything. I'm in the top level of the file, meaning I'm not inside of a function or some other set of curly brackets. So it's complaining. So I gotta take that out of there and put that in here. Cool. Okay. And let's say I did this. Use effect. So again, use effect will run a function when the page loads. First, let's just kind of get this basic setup. I always just like to do the boilerplate setup so we don't get into any weird infinite. Actually, I'll show you what happens if I don't put this array here. Okay. And if I do console.log, actually, let's just do a state change. So set state. Okay, and we're going to set it to state plus 1. Now, what's going to happen? Let me just open up this. Okay. Let me refresh the page, and let's also console log the state so you can actually see what's going to happen now. Log state. Okay, so if I refresh this page, so you're starting to see, like, I just created like this infinite loop, and we end up getting this warning here: maximum update depth exceeded. Okay, we've updated the state too many times, because what happens is that since I didn't put that array, I forgot to put the array that prevents it from happening over and over again. I created an infinite loop. Okay, so whenever you're using use state, you want to make sure you have that second array empty there to prevent it from running over and over again arbitrarily. Because again, anytime set state runs, this whole function runs again. Okay, so if in the body of the function you update the state, you're going to create an infinite loop. And if you're using an API, you're going to quickly end up going through your API request threshold. So be careful with that. Sorry for the sirens. I live in Brooklyn, but not for much longer. I should be in Orlando come July. Yay, Florida. Okay, cool. So there's that. You want to avoid that. And another common error, this is not necessarily an error this is not essentially an error of React. It's more of a JavaScript thing. But let's pretend that I'm looking for a property called contact. And in contact, there's different forms of contact: phone number, email, whatnot, all inside this Alex object. Okay? So if I go here and I say div, and notice I didn't add it. There is no contact section. So if I were to show Alex dot contact, I'm going to get refresh. Why are you wearing? Oh, it's because this page is frozen because it's locked up by that infinite loop. My bad. That loop is still going. Okay, so I got to restart the server. Or just go to localhost 3000 again. Okay, but if you see here, notice that like below alex.name, we go to alex.contact and we see nothing because alex.contact is undefined. So when it comes to an object, if there's a property that doesn't exist, that's fine. That property is just undefined. But undefined is a special type of object that will never ever have properties. So if you try to access the property of something that is undefined, okay, so I say alex.contact.email, I get this error. Well, not that one. There we go. Cannot read property email of undefined because it's looking for an email property in contact, but contact is undefined. So if you want to access a property of an actual object that's undefined, that's fine. But you can't access a property of undefined. So since contact is undefined, and I'm trying to access the property email of that non-existent object, it's going to throw me an error. And you'll run into this a lot with like APIs and stuff like that. A very nice solution nowadays, there's a couple, like the old school solution was to do a ternary operator. Okay, so you would do something like this. You would do like alex.contact. So that way, if, you know, is there a contact object? And if there is, then you do contact.email. And if not, you would just say like no email. Actually, let me put that in a string. Okay, no email. So you see now it says no email because it'll check, hey, does this exist? If it doesn't exist, if it does exist, then do the thing. And if not, then do this thing. Which is fine. That's I've done that for years. But nowadays in newer JavaScript, you have this available to you. You can do Alex. Then we do a question mark. Actually, I think the question mark comes first. I always get confused on that. .contact. .email. And see, no error. This is what's called nullish chaining. Okay, and what this means is that it's going to check. So we know Alex is an object, and it's going to look for a property called contact. If that property is undefined, it will just stop and go no further. So it never tries to look for email to create an error. Okay, if contact does exist, then it'll go do the same thing for email, and it'll like, okay, hey, does email exist? And if not, it would stop looking there. So you can, as long as you keep putting in these question mark dots, instead, like you can chain as deep as you want, then you won't necessarily trigger these can't find, you know, property this of undefined errors. It doesn't necessarily it's still nice to kind of sometimes have a default value set up, but this is certainly like a nice tool because before this existed, really was only added in 2020. Before this, basically, actually, I think it might have been added in 2019, but got the browser compatibility in 2020. I forget. It's hard to keep track of all these changes every year. But that made life a lot easier. But before, it was like ternary operators all over your React code. So that's a big one. Aside from that, I think we covered all sort of like the main types of errors that people will have. Now, another thing that can happen is that, hey, like if I just comment out the return block and this thing returns nothing, I will get, let me refresh the page. I get this error. Nothing was returned from render. What that means is that my component did not return JSX. So it's saying, hey, in the app component, hey, the thing it returned didn't have JSX in it. So we have a problem here. Okay. I can return null and explicitly say, hey, return nothing, but I can't not have a return statement because I need JSX to be returned. So that's what that error means. Okay. And then if I, let's see here, let's say if I forgot to export it, what error would we get? Okay, so I take that out and we get this. App.js, unexpected token. Well, let me get rid of that semicolon because that's not the error I want to get. Here, actually, I'll just export the number 5 just to kind of get the point across. Okay, refresh. Okay, see, in here we get this. It expected a string for built-in components or a class function. Okay, so the idea is like it's expecting either like a string of HTML or some JSX of some sort, or it's expecting like a function or a class that it can use to find get JSX. Like it's instead I've returned the number 5. That's not because again, this app gets imported in index.js and we try to use this app, but technically now app's just the number 5. So I broke it and I got that error. Okay. So see, expected string, that means something forgot to return JSX. Okay. So always keep that in mind. Yeah, other things I can think of off the top of my head that are a little harder to demonstrate is like you'll oftentimes map over things in React. Just always make sure you don't forget the return values in your maps, because maps return you an array of the return values. So if you don't return something, there you're generating an empty array. But aside from that, those are sort of like the low-hanging fruit, typical errors you'll see in React. The other big issue people run into is when they deploy, they get, like on Netlify, they end up in an issue where they can't deploy it. Really, all you want to do is you want to go to your build script here, and you just type in CI equals. What this does is it turns off the continuous integration features of Create React App. You could deploy without doing this, but then you have to make sure that there's no warnings in your code. So you have to treat even the warnings as errors because it will fail to build otherwise. So that would be the way around that. And the other common issue is like with React Router, where basically you refresh the page and it breaks. To fix that, you just need to look up how do you make redirects for your particular host, whether it's Netlify, render.com, Vercel, Amplify, whoever. Look in their documentation. What you want to do is set up a URL redirect, so that way any URL gets redirected back to the index.html file that's generated in the build process. But aside from that, yeah, those are the sort of ins and outs of typical React errors. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. You have a great day and enjoy.